Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching this. In the language of AARP driver safety, today 80 is in my windshield. Tomorrow 80 will be in my rear view mirror. I'm taking a little bit of time to reflect on my life and share it with you. Thank you for listening and watching. Tomorrow will be my 80th birthday, and I will be reminded many times by the congratulations, but also by the fact that I will be singing at a funeral of a 20-year-old young lady. Just reminds me and can remind all of us how precious life is. I remember in 1980, Dick Obershaw was doing a workshop at Guardian Angels on death and dying, and he asked a young lady if she had lived her life. And the young lady said, "No, I'm not very old, and so I've got a long life to live." And he said the challenge wasn't to live a long life, but to live life to the fullest every day possible. Today is the birthday of my brother Joe. He's 65. It also is the anniversary of our brother Dan's death 4 years ago when he was only 64. And every year I think of this week as very, very poignant. There are a lot of values that happen starting today for a week. As I mentioned, my brother's birthday, my brother Joe, my brother Dan's anniversary of death. Tomorrow is my birthday. The day after is the anniversary of my mother's death. That would be 30 years ago already. May 1st is the anniversary of Mary and I buying the house on the east side where we raised our family. May 2nd is Mary's anniversary of birth. And May 4th is my brother Chucky's anniversary of death. He died when he was 4.5 years old in 1957. And because of that death, I went from intending to go to Cretan High School. I ended up in the seminary many, many miles away, and I was in the seminary for quite a few years. In fact, I remember saying to people that I had been home with my family for 14 years, and then I had been in the seminary for 14 years after that. And then I left the seminary and continued my life after that. But choosing to go to the seminary had lots of implications, not the least of which was I was never a teenager at home with my parents nor with my siblings, and I didn't live in a house where there were teenagers in a family. I clearly lived with a seminary group in high school where there were a lot of teenagers, but there was no family as we called it. I belonged to a religious community, and that had some very positive things about it. One was, in the religious community, nobody was in charge of everything. Each person had their parts to play in the life of the community, and I think that was a value that I have taken from my experience of living with the Oblates of Mary Immaculate, that everything isn't my responsibility, and I can share, and everybody can pull their weight with the expertise that they have. I lived at a very exciting time in the history of the church. As most of you know, the Second Vatican Council began in 1959 by being called by Pope John the 23rd, and the sessions were from 1962 to 1965, and there were documents thereafter. It made it an exciting time to be in the church. The church was then thought of as a community of people, and that was much different than what I had experienced in grade school. I remember a pastor that I worked with who said church ministers need to dig deep into the lives of the people in the parish, but not plant roots. And I think I've done that actually quite well, and maybe to my detriment that I don't have a lot of intimate friends through all of my 80 years, but I certainly have dug deep into the lives of many, many families and many, many people, and have wonderful memories of those kinds of associations. My parents loved music. My dad played the piano. My mother sang. My dad sang as well. And music was always important to me. I led choirs when I was in the high school seminary, and I had the opportunity through 3 years of summer school and part-time during that third year of education to go to Loyola University in New Orleans and study music formally. Music has been an unbelievably important part of my life. I think I like the amount of music that I studied and did. I don't know that I could ever be a professional musician. That takes a significant more discipline, I think, than I have to spend 4 or 5 hours a day practicing. That is not to say that the people that we see on stage with the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra aren't marvelous people, but I don't know that I have the discipline to do music the way they do. I have continued singing and cantering for all of these years, and I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed trying to serve people both as weekend assembly folks and families at funerals. I enjoy providing music for funerals, particularly at St. Matthew's. It's my gift to the parish community to be able to continue to do that even at 80 years old. I met Mary or I should say she met me, because I don't remember her specifically, at the first Mass of a classmate of mine. And we started conversing at Masses at St. Pius X when she would come with another nun friend of hers. And then we did start dating, and we married in August of 1973, so this would be 50 years of marriage for us. And I think part of the attraction, or part of the similarity certainly between Mary and me, is that we both went to religious formation after 8th grade, so we left our homes. Mary had some experience of teens in the house because she was the fourth after 3 boys. But we married and tried to live simply. One of the things that I remember is we chose as a second reading for our wedding language from the 2nd chapter of Acts of the Apostles that talked about the qualities of the early Christian community, not just gathering and breaking bread, but bringing all of the resources and putting them at the feet and disposal of the apostles for use by those who had less than the people who brought the gifts to the apostles. We tried again to be simple and to be aware of those who had less, both locally and globally. I worked in parish ministry for 50 years. I retired when I was 78. I had the opportunity of working with many different pastors. And in those opportunities of working, I was able to see the less attractive qualities that I didn't want and the more attractive qualities that I did want if I was going to work in parish ministry with parishioners in all different aspects. I particularly admired and still admire Steve Adrian, who was a year older than I, a parochial minister, a priest of the Diocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis. I had the opportunity of working with him most of the years from 1996 until I retired in 2021. Mary and I raised our family on the east side. The phenomenon where we were was that our children had 10 sets of surrogate grandparents within 150 yards of our house, though there were very few children. I remember about 20 years ago telling people that my 3 children had achieved the education they wanted, one a PhD, one an MA, and one a BA, that they had jobs that they more or less didn't mind going to or went to with some enthusiasm. They had partners, adult partners in their lives, and most importantly, they had permanent housing, not at our house. But I said, you know, I was 60 years old then, and we probably deserved that. We had 3 weddings, and since then we have had 7 grandchildren. Mary was living for the birth of the first 5 grandchildren, and the last 2 were born after she died. Mary had found a home teaching at St. Pascal's on the east side after she had done some long-term subbing for about 2 years in different Catholic schools on the east side and the west side and beyond. And it was there in her teaching when she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in Holy Week of 2004. That made obviously a tremendous difference, a large impact on us, certainly on her, on our family. But one of the things that we said, and I remember even using the words, that woulda, coulda, shoulda isn't going to make any difference. We need to live our lives as fully as we can, even around this diagnosis, the surgery, the chemotherapy, and the radiation that followed, and there was much of all of that. In my baseball lingo, that's the pitch we were throwing, and that's the pitch we had to hit. You can use your own image to think about how we tried to live our lives through that time. I will say that though Mary retired early from teaching first grade, she continued to tutor first graders in public schools in reading through a program called Eastside Learning Center, and it was indeed that kind of tutoring that continued to give her energy and enthusiasm for living. She even scheduled her chemotherapy so that the pain of that would not interfere with the days in which she was tutoring. She died in July of 2010, incidentally 100 days or about 100 days after my father had died earlier in that year. There were many, many people who came and gave me their sympathies, and I remember working particularly with the nuns from the Notre Dame community, and we did an all-night vigil between the visitation of the previous night and her funeral the following day. She's buried at Guardian Angels, and we have 2 plots there. I anticipate being buried there as well whenever my earthly life will come to an end. In the middle of working for parishes, I became involved with the sister parish effort at Guardian Angels and was privileged to be the representative from Guardian Angels 7 times to the country of Nicaragua, to the town of Teostepe and the parish of St. Rita. That was very life-confirming for me in the sense of the life that those people were living. I just remember living some kinds of those same values and some kinds of those same simple ways when I was growing up in the 1940s. I know that the first trip I took, the younger people on the trip were just astounded because they had not had the experience of living in the 1940s. Another aspect of my life, I threw my hat into the ring to be the state coordinator of AARP driver safety. I had been a coordinator, an instructor for 10 years, and when there was an opening, I offered myself and I was chosen to be that state coordinator, and it was just another way of me serving people and also coordinating volunteers. Again, I found great reward in working as a volunteer there. I celebrate the last 10 years living with Peg. One of the things that she and I agree on is that our relationship is much different than the relationship we would have had with our previous spouses, since our values and the way we live life is different than our previous spouses were. But I give thanks for that time with Peg and her immediate and extended family as well. I have had a great relationship with my extended family, particularly the many cousins and nieces and nephews, et cetera, and my dad's extended family. We had a reunion about 8 years ago when we had second cousins coming from Germany and northern Canada, and we enjoyed each other, and we continue to have some relationships and look forward to another one, although the people in my generation have conveniently passed on the responsibility for the next reunion to the next generation. Whether it will happen or not is entirely up to them. I thank you for being part of my journey. This past week, we had the reading of the apostles after the resurrection, walking on the way to the town of Emmaus, walking and talking. And I think of this experience somewhat similar. We have walked together and we have talked, and in that way we've grown, and in that way we've learned a lot more about each other, and we've learned about the community of the human race and how responsible we are to each other for that. In response to my birthday, I just want to challenge each of us, including me. I want to challenge us to choose some kind of charitable work, charitable program, some kind of charity to, first of all, pray for, secondly, to financially support, and thirdly, to become involved with. I mean, it's the time, talent, and treasure that is going to make a difference to the people who have less than we do. because I'm a firm believer that we are all going to be successful, or none of us is. Thank you, and God bless you.